I honestly didn't think I was going to be doing streaming. That was never my intention for any of these videos. I actually recorded a bunch of these educational advice videos ahead of time, but when I went to edit them to put them onto YouTube, I just felt so disconnected. Because for full information, have essentially been doing creative writing teaching for several years now. I used to teach in classrooms and with clubs, and I like lectures at universities. So to it felt so disjointed and just like disconnected to not have a live audience where I could have questions and, you know, just give answers at the time. So I decided that I'd start streaming instead of actually recording and then just editing and posting these videos. I feel like that's more true to who I am as a content creator. But yeah, just disclaimers aside. Um, First of all, I should probably introduce myself. I am Everest M. Radley, author of Unhuman. This is my first stream that I plan on doing for my YouTube channel and for my Twitch. My my writing portfolio is quite extensive. I can speak English. So I finished my first book at 13. I would then go on to write, I think 10 more books. I've honestly lost count, but I've won awards from my university for poetry. I almost won the Waddies, which is the largest writing competition on the planet at the moment. In 2018, I came in as a semifinalist. So yeah, I've just kind of been all over the place. I have a lot of educational creative writing background. I published my first book, Unhuman Volume 1, in 2021, so last year, and I'm about to publish my second, Unhuman Volume 2, as of January 31st, 2022. So yes, I've just had a really busy writing career. I've been all over the place. I've done everything, if you can imagine it, I've probably done it. Like, aside from having like a full permanent permanent job as a creative writing instructor, I've done pretty much everything else. So with that in mind, I thought, well, why not share the three basic I guess pieces of advice that I've picked up over the years, things that I recommend to almost every single either new writer or somebody who is a young writer and they want to get into writing, anyone who wants to publish their books or make their job as a career author. So that's what this video is about. In the future, other videos will be about other educational stuff, but why not just start with the basics? So I have 3 tips here for you guys. These are probably the most basic, but the most difficult for people to swallow. So let's just get into it. My first tip, and this is the one that I tell literally everyone, if there's one tip that I have to give to anyone at any given time, it's that you should not publish your first book. I know that sounds super strange and super ridiculous. Why on earth, if you want to be an author, why would you not publish your first book? And the answer is pretty simple. Your first book sucks. When I finished my first book, I was super ecstatic. I was over the moon. I really, really loved writing, and that was what I wanted to do as my career. I wanted to be a full-time author. And at the time, my goals were to publish my first book by 16. So I finished my first book at 13. I wanted to publish it by 16, and I thought I was well on my way to achieving those goals. But it took me some time and honestly some self-reflection to realize that just because I wrote a book and just because I actually finished it does not mean that it was a good book. And furthermore, what I came to realize as I gained more experience as an author and as somebody who published their own book later is that had I published that first book when I did, I probably would have locked myself out permanently from ever being able to write ever again. I know that sounds super dramatic and super confusing, so let me explain. So, the traditional publishing industry, if that's the path that you want to go, is super, I don't want to say judgmental, but they're a business. obviously. They have to prioritize people who are going to make them money. And if they aren't picking up people who are going to make them money, like how are they going to make themselves money? So what they do is they will essentially look at agents, look at upcoming authors or returning authors, and they have to make a selection out of all these people of who they're going to publish in that year. So obviously people who have already been with the company, who are returning authors, are more likely to get picked first. People who have really good agents and have people in their corner who are like really arguing for them, those people are also very likely to get picked. But if you're trying to publish your first book and like this is your first rodeo in any sense, you're really going to struggle, because even if you do get that book published and even if you do land that contract, what could end up happening is, people look at your book and they look at your writing and they go, well, that was a good debut, but, we don't see where this person could go in the future. Their writing seems immature, they seem inexperienced, and what that does is after your book has been published and after all the critiques and the reviews have come in, what then ends up happening is when you try to go back and you try to publish your next book, publishing companies will look at all that information and all that data that they've just collected on you and on the book that you've published, and they might say, well, you did okay, like your first book was okay, but we honestly, we don't know if we want to publish you again. And on top of that, is if that makes matters worse, publishing companies communicate with each other. So if one publishing company is like, no, we're not going to publish you, then you can bet that several others, on that simple fact alone, will be unlikely to publish you. And that's just on the traditional publishing side. On the self-publishing side, it's really hard because, there's sharks in the water, everyone's being super competitive, everybody wants to get their foot in the door. So if you're not starting off strong and you're not starting off producing like good quality content from the very beginning, chances are you will really struggle in the self-publishing market. So number one, don't publish your first book. Trust me, you'll thank me later. Like just don't do it. You will give it like 5 or 10 years, like continue writing, continue practicing, but don't publish your first book. You'll appreciate it. All right, number two, you've got to establish goals and realistic goals. I'm not saying like goals of like word counts or page counts or like I want to sell this many books. I'm talking about goals for who you are as an author. So one thing that I realized when I was on my own writing journey was that I would constantly say to myself, I'm going to be the next J.K. Rowling or the next Stephen King or the next Brandon Sanderson. I thought about myself in terms of other authors and other creators. And what I realized is, one, that's kind of a backhanded compliment because, first of all, those people are still alive. They can still create content, and second of all, it's unrealistic. Because when you go to publish a book, why would they choose you, a newbie who, you're saying, I'm going to be this next person, over the person who actually is that person? It just doesn't make any sense. Why would they pick you over them? Chances are they won't. So you got to stop thinking about yourself of, I'm going to be the next so-and-so, and you've got to start having realistic goals for yourself. Instead of thinking about, well, I want to be this next fantasy author, I want to be this next sci-fi, you got to think, well, what can I do in fantasy, or what can I do in sci-fi that makes me unique, And once you start thinking about that in a more realistic sense, and you start setting more realistic goals for what you expect to have with your writing, in your writing career, I find that you start to leave those beginner mistakes and you start to actually make a brand for yourself. You start to gain a following. Now that I am Everest M. Radley, instead of trying to be Stephen King or J.K. Rowling, I find that people like me for me. I'm not trying to copycat someone. I'm not trying to follow in their footsteps. I want to make my own path and I want to be my own creator. So you need to really distance yourself from those ideas and from those concepts that are really, really prevalent in the writing community, and you need to become your own person. What makes you special? What makes you a good writer? And lastly, number three, this one's the hardest one for beginning writers, and that is self-evaluation. Oh my gosh. I could honestly have like a several hour stream just talking about my different experiences that I've had being a writing teacher and trying to teach new writers, and where I see a lot of them struggle. And this one, like self-evaluation, is the biggest one. If I had to pick one, it'd be the biggest one. So what I mean when self-evaluation is taking, like putting your writing right there, right? And then taking a step back and then looking at it completely. So for example, I was once teaching a creative writing class, and I had a student of mine. He put together the science fiction thriller story where these people ended up accidentally sneaking into a super high-tech military base, and they got caught, obviously, because they weren't spies or anything like that. And at the end of the story, you expect something, dramatic. Either they're going to get broken out, or, they're going to cause all this chaos, or, something dramatic is going to happen. And what ended up happening was none of those things. What ended up happening was they got caught, and they got brought to this leader of this camp or this organization, and the leader was like, well, it's too much hassle to execute them, so we'll just hire them. And I remember finishing this story, and I talked to the student, and I was like, that's an interesting way to go about things. That's certainly not expected, but why would this leader want to bring in these new people? They just snuck into this camp or this organization illegally. Why would he hire them? And he kind of like, my student kind of like looked at me, and he's like, well, I just like the way that the story ends. I'm like, what? And what he meant by that is he didn't want to change anything about the story because he found it so perfect as it was that he was completely unwilling to take any sort of feedback or critiquing or anything about his work because he liked his characters being alive, and he was so dead set on them being alive that he never would have considered anything else for them. And that's what I mean when we've got to have some sort of self-evaluation here. You've got to be willing to take a step back and look at your story and look at your craft and say, well, what am I struggling with? What do I need to work on, and what do I need to do better? And for a lot of writers, that's very, very difficult. They tend to finish their first book or the first draft, and they feel so uplifted and excited about what they've just created that they have a hard time taking that necessary step back and looking at their draft and going, well, maybe I do need to cut that scene, or maybe that character doesn't really serve any point, or maybe, so learning to do that and do that quickly, the faster that you can do that when you're writing, the faster you will be able to succeed as an author and as a writer, because anything anyone throws at you from that point on, once you start having that mentality, you'll be able to easily conquer it. So those are my 3 tips for things that you need to do if you want to publish your book or if you want to be an author. I hope you enjoyed them. Please, if you liked this, consider giving me a follow either on my Twitch platform or on my YouTube channel. Also, if you want to check out my book, I will link it later. Thank you so much. I hope that you guys enjoyed that and you learned a lot, and that you learned a lot from it. Thank you so much for watching. So until later. Bye guys.